The mirror blinked first. I swear it did, like it knew something about me that I was still refusing to say out loud. I remember the exact second everything tilted off its axis, not with thunder or a spell being shouted, but with a laugh that wasn't quite confident enough to hide the nerves underneath. "Just try it," she said, holding the dress up by its shoulders like it was no heavier than a suggestion. The room smelled faintly of laundry soap and rain from the open window, and the dress itself was a quiet blue, the kind that pretends not to draw attention while doing exactly that. I told myself it was a joke. A harmless experiment. Fabric on skin. No meaning attached. That was the first lie. I stepped into it because it felt easier than explaining why my hands were shaking. The hem brushed my calves, soft, apologetic. When she zipped it up, the sound was too final, like a door closing somewhere deep in my chest. I laughed again, louder this time, performing comfort for both of us. "See? Nothing happened." But the mirror, there it was again, held my gaze like it was waiting for the rest of the sentence. I didn't recognize what I saw, and that terrified me less than it should have. The dress settled, not just on my body but into it, as if it had been tailored by memory rather than measurement. My shoulders looked different. Or maybe I was standing differently. My posture shifted without instruction, a subtle recalibration, like my body had found a frequency it preferred. I lifted my hands, turned them over. Same hands. Different story. The blue reflected back at me, deepening, as if the color were learning me too. "Hey," she said gently, misreading my silence as embarrassment. "You okay?" I nodded, because nodding was easier than explaining the pressure behind my eyes. The mirror showed a person caught mid-breath, someone on the edge of a realization that hadn't been invited but had arrived anyway. I felt foolish for thinking of magic, and yet there it was, humming under my skin, not sparks or light, just a quiet insistence that something irreversible had begun. When she left the room to make tea, the silence rushed in. I stepped closer to the mirror. Up close, details sharpened. My face looked softer around the edges, like the mirror had applied a filter I hadn't approved. I frowned. The frown looked unfamiliar, gentler somehow. I touched my cheek. Warm. Real. The dress responded, tightening slightly at the waist, as if acknowledging the contact. "That's not possible," I whispered, but the mirror didn't argue. "It never does. It only reflects." A memory surfaced, me as a kid, standing in a department store aisle, fingers brushing a rack of dresses before being pulled away by a well-meaning adult. The same blue. Or maybe I was projecting. Either way, the echo landed hard. I felt the old shame flicker, then dim, replaced by something dangerously close to relief. When she came back with the tea, she stopped short. Not dramatic. Just still. Her eyes moved over me, recalculating. "You look," she began, then stopped. "Different." I wanted to say it was the lighting, or the mirror, or that I was just standing weird. Instead, I asked, "Different how?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt, but there was a new note in it, a resonance I didn't recognize. The dress seemed to hum in agreement. She smiled, careful and kind. "Like you're finally in focus." The words landed heavier than any spell could have. I took the mug from her, hands steady now, and felt a warmth spread that had nothing to do with the tea. Focus. As if my life until now had been slightly blurred, like a photo taken too quickly. As if the mirror had been waiting years for me to step into frame. I caught my reflection again over her shoulder. The blue was brighter. My silhouette had shifted, subtle, deniable, but undeniable to me. A line here, a curve there. The dress wasn't just on me anymore. It was with me. "I should change," I said, automatically. But I didn't move. The mirror held us both, a quiet witness. Somewhere inside, a question formed, not loud enough to be fear yet, but too persistent to ignore. What if taking it off wasn't as simple as putting it on? And more frightening still, what if I didn't want it to be? The longer I stood there, the more the room felt like it was holding its breath with me. I really should, I repeated, softer now, but the words floated away before they could become action. My feet were rooted, not by fear exactly, but by a strange, steady calm that had slipped in unnoticed. The mirror reflected a version of me that looked like it belonged in the dress, like the fabric had finally found the right body rather than the other way around. I shifted my weight, testing it, and the movement felt natural. Too natural. She pretended not to stare, busying herself with a tea she'd made for me, but I caught the glances anyway. Not judgmental. Curious. Careful. The kind of look you give something fragile because you don't know if it's about to break or bloom. You don't have to rush, she said, as if reading my thoughts, or maybe my reflection. It's just clothes. Just clothes. Another almost truth. I took a slow sip, grounding myself in the heat, the bitterness. My hands, were they smaller? No. Maybe. The mug felt heavier than it should have, or maybe I was lighter. The dress shifted again, responding to my breathing, tightening and loosening in a rhythm that felt eerily synchronized with my heartbeat. I glanced down, then back up at the mirror, searching for angles that would reassure me this was all in my head. That's when I noticed my hair. It hadn't changed dramatically. Not yet. But it fell differently around my face, framing it in a way that made my eyes look wider, my jaw less sharp. I lifted a strand, watched how it caught the light. The mirror offered me a quiet, intimate smile that I hadn't consciously made. The sight of it sent a jolt through me, fear braided with something like pride. Do you see it? I asked before I could stop myself. She paused. See what? I gestured vaguely at myself, at the space between us and the glass. I don't look like I did 5 minutes ago. She studied me more openly now. People change, she said carefully. Sometimes faster than they expect. That answer sat with me in a way that made my chest feel tight. I'd always thought of change as something that happened to other people, slowly, over years, with milestones and explanations. This felt different. This felt like a door I hadn't known was unlocked, swinging open all at once. A sudden urge hit me, to prove I still could. I reached for the zipper at my back, fingers brushing the cool metal. The mirror watched. The dress seemed to resist, not physically, but with a weight of intention, like a question being asked back at me. My fingers hesitated. What would happen if I pulled it down? Would everything snap back, elastic and relieved? Or would something tear, inside me, or worse, in the reflection? My hand fell away. I can't, I said, surprised at how honest it sounded. She didn't push. She just nodded, as if this were an answer she'd been expecting all along. Then don't, she said. Not yet. Not yet. The words echoed, settling into the room like a promise or a warning. I turned back to the mirror, really looking this time. The blue dress had become more than fabric. It was a boundary, a threshold. On one side was the life I knew, familiar and safe and quietly incomplete. On the other was this, a version of me I couldn't unsee now that it had been reflected. The mirror didn't demand anything. It simply showed me what was happening, inch by inch, breath by breath. My shoulders sloped a little softer. My stance narrowed. The changes were small enough to deny, but together they told a story my body seemed eager to continue. I pressed my palm flat against the glass. It was cool, solid, real. If this is a mistake, I whispered, it's a very convincing one. The reflection met my touch perfectly, palm to palm, like it had been waiting for permission. Time began behaving strangely after that, stretching and folding in on itself like it was unsure which version of me it was meant to follow. She stepped out to take a call, leaving me alone with the mirror and the soft, humming quiet of the room. The silence wasn't empty, it was observant. I paced once, twice, feeling the dress move with me, not against me. Each step felt rehearsed, like my body had been practicing in secret for years and was relieved to finally stop pretending otherwise. I caught my reflection from the side and froze. The outline had shifted again. Not dramatically. Not enough that anyone else would panic. But enough that I noticed. My waist curved inward just a touch more than it had before. My chest rose and fell differently, breath settling lower, smoother. I placed a hand there, more instinct than intention, and felt a calm spread through me that made my eyes sting. This isn't happening, I thought, and then, almost immediately, this has always been happening. The mirror felt like a witness to a long argument I'd finally stopped fighting. It reflected not just what I looked like, but how I stood, how I held my head, how my expression softened when I forgot to guard it. I wasn't posing. I was arriving. A sound drifted from the hallway, music from someone else's apartment, a song I half recognized. The melody threaded through me, and something unexpected happened. My reflection smiled wider, like it remembered the tune before I did. A phrase from the song stuck, looping in my head, becoming a refrain I couldn't shake. You don't have to hide. The words weren't even in the lyrics, but they felt true anyway. I tried again to remove the dress, more gently this time, as if negotiating. My fingers traced the seam instead of grabbing the zipper. The fabric was warmer now, almost like skin. When I tugged lightly, there was resistance. Not forceful, just firm, like a seatbelt locking when you pull too hard. My heart started racing. Okay, I breathed, backing away from the mirror. Okay. Panic flared, sharp and sudden. What if I'd crossed some invisible line? What if this wasn't temporary curiosity but permanent consequence? Images rushed in, explaining myself, being stared at, losing things I hadn't realized were conditional. My reflection mirrored the fear, eyes widening, lips parting. Seeing it on that face, my face, made it feel real in a way thoughts alone never had. And then, just as quickly, something steadier pushed back. Alongside the fear was a warmth, a quiet certainty that hummed in the same frequency as the dress. The mirror showed me standing there, breathing through it, not collapsing. Still here. Still me. Maybe more me than I'd ever been. When she came back, she paused again, longer this time. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded, though my voice shook when I answered. I think I'm changing. She didn't laugh. She didn't deny it. She just said, how does that feel? I searched myself for the honest answer. Fear, yes. Confusion. A grief I hadn't expected, for the ease of not knowing. But beneath all of it was something luminous and fragile, like the first moment after stepping into sunlight from a dark room. It feels like I've been holding my breath, I said, and I didn't know until now. Her eyes softened. Then breathe. I turned back to the mirror one more time. The blue dress seemed brighter again, the color deepening with every truth I spoke aloud. The song from the hallway faded, but the refrain stayed, echoing quietly inside me. You don't have to hide. I wasn't sure yet what I was becoming. But for the first time, I was certain of one thing. I didn't want to go back. The world outside the room didn't end the way I half expected it to. It just kept going, casually unaware that my axis had shifted. There was a knock at the door. A normal sound. Too normal. My heart jumped anyway, because suddenly the mirror wasn't the only witness anymore. I glanced down at the dress, then back at my reflection, searching for permission or refusal. The mirror offered neither. It simply showed me standing there, still breathing, still real. I'll get it, she said, already moving, as if shielding me without announcing it. The door opened, voices exchanged, mundane things about a package, a signature. I stood frozen, listening, acutely aware of how exposed I felt without anyone actually seeing me. The tension surprised me. I'd spent years trying not to be noticed, Yet now the idea of being seen like this sent a complicated ache through my chest. When the door closed again, I exhaled so hard my shoulders sagged. The dress shifted with me, accommodating, supportive. I noticed then how my movements had changed, not exaggerated, not theatrical, just adjusted. My center of gravity felt different, balanced, as if my body had quietly reorganized itself around a truth it had been waiting to prioritize. "You don't have to hide in here forever," she said gently, watching me from the doorway. "But you don't have to rush either. Forever." The word echoed, heavy and bright all at once. I took a few steps toward the mirror again, slower this time, studying the changes like a map slowly revealing itself. My face looked calmer than I felt, eyes clearer, expression less guarded. There was a tenderness there I didn't remember earning. I raised an eyebrow experimentally. The expression that came back felt right, familiar in a way that startled me. "What if people notice?" I asked. She shrugged lightly. "They usually do. Eventually. The question is whether you're ready to notice yourself first." I laughed then, a small, surprised sound. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," she said. "But it can be honest." Honest. The word landed softly, but it stayed. Another subtle shift rippled through me, like a sentence finishing itself. My voice, when I spoke again, carried a different texture, smoother at the edges. I hadn't been trying. That was what unsettled me most. The dress wasn't forcing anything. It was revealing, like a highlighter gliding over lines that had already been written. I imagined stepping outside like this. The sidewalk. The sky. Reflections in store windows instead of just this mirror. The thought made my stomach flip. Half fear, half anticipation. I realized then that the dress had become more than a garment. It was a boundary between who I'd been for safety and who I might be for truth. I rested my hand over my heart, feeling it beat, fast, but steady. "If I take this off," I said slowly, "I don't know what happens." She met my eyes. "And if you don't?" The mirror caught the moment between us, holding it perfectly still. The blue seemed to deepen again, like dusk settling into evening. I saw myself there, uncertain, afraid, and unmistakably present. Not disappearing. Not pretending. "I think," I said, choosing each word carefully, "that whatever's happening, it doesn't want to be undone." The reflection nodded with me, a quiet agreement. The first step into the hallway felt heavier than any step I'd taken inside the room, like gravity itself had opinions. The air out there was cooler, carrying the faint smells of other lives, someone's dinner, fresh paint, old carpet. Ordinary things, grounding things. The dress brushed against my legs as I walked, a constant reminder of my choice, of the version of myself I was allowing into the light. My reflection appeared again in the darkened glass of a picture frame on the wall, warped and partial, but still unmistakably me. Or, becoming me. I moved slowly, hyper-aware of every sound I made, every shift of fabric. Each footfall echoed in my head as a question. Is this okay? Am I allowed? The mirror was gone now, but its presence lingered, like a compass I'd internalized. I carried it with me, an invisible witness. She walked a few steps behind, not crowding me, not leading. Just there. That mattered more than I expected. When we reached the end of the hallway, there was another mirror. Taller, thinner, less forgiving. I hadn't remembered it being there. My breath caught as I faced it, bracing for something harsher than what I'd seen before. But the reflection that met me wasn't cruel. It was curious. Vulnerable. Alive. The changes were clearer now. My frame had softened, lines rearranging themselves with a logic I couldn't yet explain. The dress no longer looked borrowed. It looked chosen. The blue carried a depth that felt symbolic, like the color of deep water you can't see the bottom of but trust anyway. I swallowed. This feels like crossing a line. She leaned against the wall, thoughtful. Some lines are there to be crossed. Otherwise, they're just fences we forget we built. That hit something tender. I thought of all the fences in my life, rules I'd followed without remembering who'd written them. Expectations I'd worn like uniforms. The dress felt nothing like a uniform. It felt like permission. A door opened somewhere below us. Voices drifted up the stairwell, neighbors laughing, keys jangling. My heart pounded so hard I worried it might give me away. I considered retreating, hiding, pretending this was all a strange, private moment that never had to meet the world. Instead, I stayed. The fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, making room for something steadier. Pride, maybe. Or resolve. I adjusted the dress at my shoulders, a small, deliberate gesture. The reflection followed, confident in a way I was only just learning to be. For the first time, I wondered not what if this never ends, but what if this is the beginning. The stairwell felt like a threshold, the kind you don't notice until you're already standing in it, deciding whether to go up or down. Each step downward brought a new awareness of myself in motion. The way my balance adjusted without effort. The quiet confidence in how the dress moved with me instead of lagging behind. I wasn't acting. That was the unnerving part. I was responding, instinctively, like my body had finally been given the correct instructions. Somewhere between the third and fourth step, I realized my shoulders weren't tense anymore. Halfway down, there was another reflective surface, the metal railing, dull but honest. My image curved along it, distorted yet unmistakable. Even warped, it felt right. The dress had become a constant, reassuring weight, like a sentence that no longer needed editing. I caught myself smiling again, and this time I didn't flinch. A neighbor passed at the landing below us, offering a distracted nod without really looking. The moment stretched painfully long in my head, then snapped back to normal time when nothing happened. No double take. No questions. Just footsteps continuing on. Relief flooded me so fast I had to pause, one hand on the railing, breathing through it. I started. Yeah, she said softly. Sometimes the world is less dramatic than our fears. I laughed under my breath, the sound lighter than I remembered laughter being. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had loosened its grip. I wasn't invisible, but I wasn't exposed either. I was just present, existing. The idea felt revolutionary. By the time we reached the lobby, the mirror motif returned in an unexpected way. The glass doors reflected us back, framed by daylight. The blue of the dress looked different in natural light, richer, more alive. And so did I. My face held a quiet resolve now, like someone who had made a decision they were still learning to say out loud. I caught my reflection one last time before the doors opened, and a thought settled in with surprising clarity. This wasn't about a dress. It never had been. The dress was a language my body finally understood. The doors slid apart, sunlight spilling in, and with it, the undeniable sense that stepping outside meant stepping forward. The sunlight didn't judge me, it simply revealed me. It touched the blue fabric first, drawing out subtle variations I hadn't noticed before, then climbed upward, warming my arms, my face. I blinked, adjusting, feeling strangely exposed and deeply grounded at the same time. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm, cars passing, someone laughing across the street, a bird hopping along the curb like it had an appointment to keep. Life, uninterrupted. I took a step forward, then another. Each one felt deliberate, like I was learning a new grammar of movement. My reflection flickered in shop windows as we passed, brief and incomplete but unmistakable. Every glimpse landed differently. Some sparked a flash of nerves, others a quiet thrill, and a few stirred something gentler, recognition. I wasn't looking for perfection. I was looking for truth. A breeze caught the hem of the dress, lifting it just slightly, and I laughed. Really laughed. because the sensation was so unexpectedly right. It reminded me of standing on the edge of something beautiful and scary, like the first time you admit a secret even to yourself. The mirror was gone now, replaced by 1,000 fragments of reflections scattered through the world, each one asking the same question. Can you stay? We stopped at a crosswalk. I became acutely aware of my posture, my hands, the way I was being, or might be, perceived. Old habits tried to reassert themselves, urging me to shrink, to perform familiarity. But the dress resisted that impulse, not by force, but by fit. It reminded me, gently, of the space I was allowed to take up. The light changed. We crossed. Halfway across the street, I felt it, a deeper shift, not visible but undeniable. Like something inside me clicking into alignment. The fear of being seen was still there, but it was no longer the loudest voice. Curiosity had taken its place. Hope, tentative but persistent, followed close behind. I realized then that the mirror had taught me something important. It hadn't shown me who I was becoming. It had shown me who I'd always been, waiting patiently for the world to catch up. And for the first time, I wondered what it would feel like to stop wondering if this would end, and start asking how far it could go. We stopped at a small cafe I'd passed 100 times before without ever going in, as if my life had been waiting for a different version of me to open the door. The bell chimed softly when we entered, and that sound landed straight in my chest. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and something sweet, grounding and familiar. I hesitated just inside the doorway, suddenly aware of my hands again, my voice, the possibility of having to speak. The mirror wasn't here, not literally, but I felt its absence like a test. Without it, who was I choosing to be? She ordered first, giving me space without making a show of it. When it was my turn, I felt that old reflex surge, the instinct to rush, to minimize. Instead, I took a breath. The dress settled. The words came. 1 tea, please. My voice sounded like mine. Not borrowed. Not forced. The barista smiled, nodded, moved on. No hesitation. No correction. Just acceptance in its simplest form. The exchange lasted seconds, but it rewrote something fundamental in me. I stepped aside, pulse racing, and felt an unexpected swell of pride rise to meet it. We sat by the window. Outside, my reflection floated faintly in the glass, layered over the street beyond. I studied it without flinching. The blue dress, the softened lines, the calm in my eyes, it all looked less like a transformation now and more like a revelation. The mirror motif had evolved again. No longer a judge, no longer a secret keeper, but a quiet companion. I didn't disappear, I said softly, more to myself than to her. She smiled. You showed up. The tea arrived, steam curling upward like a punctuation mark. I wrapped my hands around the cup and felt the warmth spread, anchoring me in the present. For the first time since this began, I wasn't asking when it would end. I was noticing how it felt to exist now, to be seen, to be ordinary, to be real. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, something in me settled into place. Leaving the cafe felt different than entering it, like I was carrying something fragile and precious that I hadn't had before. The bell chimed again behind us, and I caught my reflection in the glass as the door swung shut. For a split second, the image doubled, me layered over me, and then it aligned. The blue dress moved with a confidence that no longer surprised me. What surprised me was how little I wanted to look away. We walked a few blocks in silence, the comfortable kind that doesn't beg to be filled. I noticed small things, the rhythm of my steps, the way my arms swung naturally, the ease with which my breath matched my pace. None of it felt rehearsed. It felt remembered, like muscle memory from a life I'd misplaced and just recovered. At a cross street, we paused again, waiting for traffic. A group of people stood nearby, chatting, laughing. I felt the old fear flicker. Do they see me? Do they know? But it didn't catch fire. It passed through, leaving something steadier behind. I realized I wasn't bracing myself anymore. I was just standing there. The mirror returned in my thoughts, not as glass but as a question. Who are you when no one is looking? The answer came quietly and without drama. I was someone who didn't want to run. Someone who didn't want to shrink. Someone who felt, for the first time, appropriately sized for their own life. I keep thinking it'll stop, I admitted, my voice low. Like I'll wake up and this will all feel ridiculous. She looked at me, really looked, and said, "And if it doesn't?" I imagined it, the dress staying, the changes continuing, the reflection no longer surprising me at all. The thought brought a swell of fear, and then, unmistakably, a sense of relief. Then I think, I said slowly, I'd finally know where I stand. The light changed. We crossed the street together. My reflection slipped across the windows beside us, no longer fragmented, no longer fleeting. Just there. Just me. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether I could take the dress off. I was wondering who I might become if I never did. By the time we turned back toward home, the city felt different. Not changed, exactly, but reintroduced. I noticed how people occupied space with an ease I'd never allowed myself. How they leaned into conversations, laughed too loudly, existed without apology. It wasn't envy I felt anymore. It was understanding. The dress wasn't making me someone else. It was teaching me how to inhabit myself. As we walked, I became aware of another shift, quieter but deeper. My thoughts had softened. The constant internal commentary, the vigilance, the second-guessing, had dimmed to a low murmur. In its place was a steady awareness, like standing near a calm body of water. I felt present in my body in a way I never had before, each movement intentional without being forced. We passed a storefront with a wide, clear window, impossible to ignore. My reflection appeared again, full and unbroken. I stopped without thinking. There I was. Not perfect. Not finished. But undeniably real. The blue dress draped over a body that now felt aligned with its own outline. My face held a quiet confidence I hadn't practiced. My eyes, those were the biggest surprise. They looked like they were finally facing forward instead of scanning for exits. I lifted my chin slightly. The reflection followed. A memory surfaced, me years ago, avoiding mirrors, catching only fragments by accident. I'd thought it was modesty or disinterest. Now I understood it had been distance. I hadn't wanted to look too closely at someone I didn't yet recognize. I don't think I'm going back, I said, not as a declaration, but as an observation. She nodded, like this was simply information catching up to itself. You don't have to know everything today. I know, I said. And I did. That was the remarkable part. As we started walking again, the mirror stayed behind, but the feeling didn't. The recurring question that had haunted me since the beginning, what if I can't take it off, had quietly transformed into something gentler, something braver. What if I don't need to? By the time we reached the quiet streets near home, the blue dress had stopped feeling like an experiment. It had become a rhythm, an extension of me I was no longer questioning. I noticed the little details, the sway of the fabric as I walked, the way my shoulders naturally aligned, the subtle curve of my silhouette reflected in the windows we passed. Each fragment of reflection felt like reassurance. You are here and you belong. It wasn't about vanity. It wasn't about performance. It was about recognition. The thought struck me suddenly. This dress, this reflection, this new alignment, it wasn't magic. Not in the way the world defines magic. It was awareness, acceptance, courage, woven into fabric and steps and mirrors until the line between them blurred. The dress had become a symbol, yes, but more than that, it was a reminder that I could inhabit myself fully without apology. We stopped in front of our building. The familiar lobby, usually dull, seemed charged with quiet significance. I hesitated at the threshold, my reflection in the glass doors catching the fading sunlight. I studied it carefully. Every line, every curve, every shift in my expression told me the same thing. I had arrived, but I was still moving. Transformation wasn't a single moment. It was a series of conscious breaths, a series of choices reflected outward. I think I'm ready, I whispered to no one in particular. She gave me a soft smile, one that held pride and patience. You've been ready a long time. The truth in that statement hit me harder than I expected. All these years of doubt, of hiding, of questioning, I hadn't been waiting for someone else's approval. I'd been waiting for my own courage to catch up. I stepped inside, each movement deliberate, yet effortless. The dress moved with me, a companion, not a constraint. And for the first time since I'd put it on, I felt fully aligned. Not perfect, not finished, but undeniably myself. The mirror at the end of the hallway reflected me again, but I barely needed it anymore. I recognized the person staring back. I didn't just see the dress. I saw acceptance, presence, continuity, and a quiet, thrilling freedom. The question that had haunted me since the beginning, the one about taking it off, felt distant, almost irrelevant. Because I had already chosen something far more lasting. I was staying. Back in my apartment, the evening light slanted through the blinds, casting stripes across the floor and over the dress. I sank into a chair by the window, letting the weight of the day settle around me. The city hummed outside, unaware that I had crossed some invisible line and emerged on the other side. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully observe, not just my reflection, but the way my body felt in this form, the resonance of my movements, the subtle strength in my posture. The dress had stopped being just fabric. It had become an extension of my own voice, a way of existing that I could finally inhabit without doubt. I ran my hands over it lightly, as if confirming it was real. It was. And so was I. I thought of all the mirrors that had guided me here, some literal, some metaphorical. Each had shown me a glimpse of what was possible, a reflection I might finally trust. I realized I hadn't just changed physically. I had opened myself to something deeper, acceptance, courage, and the quiet thrill of authenticity. A smile tugged at the corners of my lips, soft, almost shy. I realized that the question that had shadowed me from the very start, "What if I can't take it off?" was no longer frightening. It had transformed into something almost joyful. What if I don't want to? The blue dress shimmered subtly in the fading sunlight, a reminder that this was more than appearance. It was a choice, a revelation, and now, a companion. I stood and moved to the mirror one last time, observing every line, every curve, every nuance that had once terrified me. The reflection nodded back in quiet understanding. And then I whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "I'm here. Finally." The dress swayed as I turned away, no longer a question, no longer a test. Just presence. Just me. The transformation hadn't ended. It had simply begun.